Hello, Tony here again. Well, I said I was going to show a few more things. I've got a few panels backlogged from showing on YouTube, so I thought I'd start with another panel, the DR400. I think I mentioned it in one of my other videos. So here it is. This is a Xplane 11 and Microsoft Flight Sim panel. So I think I mentioned previously that this is quite dynamic. It's got a bit of panel scripting in it to swap the instruments around. If you were to do a comparison, which I did when I was developing this panel of the two aeroplanes in the two different sims, then you will see that although the basic layout is the same and generally the instrument panel is mainly the same, the layout of some of the smaller instruments is a little different. So the panel scripting looks at how they're laid out and moves them around accordingly. So we're in Xplane at the moment, and this is the layout for the DR400 in Xplane. It's probably important to say that the DR400 is not a default aeroplane in Xplane, but it is freeware. This is the XPFR, small community developing some instruments from way back in Xplane. This one is compatible with Xplane 9, which is nice. It flies really nice. So I thought I'd do a dual panel, obviously for the two sims, because there is a DR400 in the new Microsoft Flight Sim. Well, maybe not quite so new now. So let's get started. What we see here, let's pull up the big panel so we can just see it a little bigger. So this is the left hand side panel, and on the left hand side panel you've got your normal battery and alternator switches down in the bottom corner here. A key switch. You'll notice the key switch only has got the ignition on it. It hasn't got the start there. Now in the Xplane FR version, this one in Xplane, it does actually start the aeroplane on the key starter with a start position, although it's not labelled, but that's how you start it. In the normal DR400, the start button is on the fuel selector. It's hidden under the lever, so you can't actually get to it unless the fuel is on. And that's how it is in the Microsoft Flight Sim version. So I left that as this because I don't think this version is quite right. See, I've not explored every single DR400 out there, but from the bit of researches I did, looking at the real ones, it looks like the starter is on the fuel selector, so that's the way I modelled it. We'll have a look at that in a minute. It's on the right hand side panel. So this key switch doesn't have a start, it only has the ignition off, right, left, and both for your mag control, and then you use a separate starter button over on the right hand side panel to start the aircraft. So here's a selection of the small gauges that I was referring to earlier, and the RPM. In fact, it's mainly the engine gauges, and the supplementary gauges are the ones that are different. Obviously the 6-pack's going to be the same and whatnot, and I think the layout of some of the radios is a tad different too. So I've included all of those, and I'll fire up the Microsoft Flight Sim version in a moment, and we'll have a look at that one, and you'll see the differences. So they replicate what's in the sim, or the sim version of each of those two sims. So we've got a battery gauge here, an oil pressure gauge, a main fuel tank. So this version models the main and the auxiliary fuel tanks, whereas the Microsoft Flight Sim version doesn't. It only models the main tank, so you'll only see one fuel gauge there in the Microsoft panel, for instance. Oil temperature, there's the auxiliary fuel tank gauge. There's a control there for operating the auxiliary tank. What that allows is the transfer of fuel between the auxiliary tank and the main tank. The engines are fed from the main tank. So you have to open that if this is getting low and you've got plenty of fuel in here, otherwise the engine will starve of fuel. RPM gauge, self-explanatory. Carb heat and carb heat control up here, this blue handle. That's a slider, so that can be slid in and out. You can adjust the amount of carb heat. Nothing will show on the gauge at the moment because there's no power on. but as you get the engine running and you adjust that carb heat, you will see this carb temperature adjust depending on how much carb heat you've got in. So the idea is that you keep it out of the yellow band there when you're flying. And then a fuel pressure gauge at the end, which caught me out earlier while I was preparing for this video. For some reason I had trouble starting the aeroplane, and I don't know what happened, but there was a small bug in the fuel selector logic, and I thought it was turning on, but it wasn't, and I should have realised because the fuel pressure wasn't coming up. But anyway, there's the fuel pressure gauge, so I know that works well. And below it, a fuel pump switch, electric fuel pump switch. And then above those engine instruments, the normal 6-pack, so a custom airspeed indicator, an AH, an altimeter, turn coordinator, a directional gyro, and a VS, and then a CDI tied into the nav receiver over on the other panel, and an ADF indicator, because there's an ADF receiver as well on the right hand side panel. A set of annunciators along the top there with the tail number, a compass that pops up, usual pop-up compass, so we can set our DG down here. Looks like we're okay. And then a little bit creative here, what I didn't mention was the suction gauge over on the left hand side over here. And so these controls are kind of central in the center console, sort of between the two seats. The trim certainly is. There's a trim control. I don't have the control here because I as most people do, use trim on the joystick or the yoke. And so this is an indicator where you take off range there and you can set the trim. You don't need power for that because that's a manual trim wheel. A parking brake control, which I find is very useful for being completely keyboard and mouseless in the cockpit. You obviously need all these controls on there. You can't be able to hunt around looking to hit the key. You only kind of use that park brake at the beginning and end of the flight, but such an important thing to have on the panel. I think that's about everything on that panel. And then so what we'll do is we'll flick over to the other side, and then on the other side we have a set of dimmers at the top there for controlling the lighting of the various different lights. Again, as per my other panels, this is fully night lighting capable, so it has all the dimming capabilities and the panel darkening for the night lighting effects. Some external light controls, so your landing, taxi, anti-collision and nav light switches, along with your avionics switch. A strange place for an avionics switch, but yeah, the DR400s do have the avionics switch up there. You would have perhaps expected it to be down here with the battery and the alternator switch maybe, but yeah, that's where they have it, so that's where it is. And then in this particular panel, there's the usual Bendix King Navcom. I think that was a new transponder that I had to do, KT71. It's a variation. It sits somewhere between the KT76A and C, I believe, or in and around that era anyway. It's not completely mechanical. It has a digital display similar to the 76C, but it doesn't have the push button code entry. It still has the dials like the 76A, so it's kind of a mismatch between the two. So there's a KT70 and a KT71 that are in that model range, and then the usual GNS 430 below it, and then below that a Collins ADF to drive that ADF indicator we looked at on the left hand side panel. And then it doesn't have an audio panel as such, but this very basic intercom unit here on the right hand side that sits in an instrument hole on the Microsoft Flight Sim version. I think it sits below the radio stack, but it's still there. And then a flaps indicator, an EGT and an OAT gauge, Again, these are a little different on the Microsoft Flight Sim panel, which you'll see when we load that one up. And then an ELT switch, a flaps indicator which doubles up as a control. You can drag the handle. And the fuel selector. So the fuel selector is Knobster enabled, so you can turn it on and off, and when you turn it to the on position you can see that red button there now that's showing, which is the starter button, and I can just use the push button on the end of the Knobster to do the start. Nothing's going to happen because we don't have power. So in as we're going to probably do a quick startup, we'll leave that fuel selector in the on position and we'll turn that off and go back to our normal view, so we can see both the panels there and the outside, and we'll do nothing serious but a quick engine start. So we'll have battery on, alternator on, mixture rich, fuel pressure is good. Okay, clear prop. That's as easy as the start gets. See some of these annunciators that will come on there for the flaps, and you can do a test. And then you see the auxiliary fuel. If I click on that, we should very slowly see the auxiliary tank start to go down, and the main tank needle will hopefully rise just a little bit. They're moving ever so slowly. You probably can't quite see that on the video, but I can just about see it. I'll turn that off. So we're not going to go for a fly today. Just thought I'd show this panel very quickly. One of the ones that I've been working on. So I think we'll go ahead and shut down now, and I'll fire up the Microsoft Flight Sim version, and you can see the differences yourself. Be back in a moment. Well, we're back again. This time we're in Microsoft Flight Sim. As you can see, the panels are very similar. The annunciators on the top there with the dimmers and the light switches. The 6-pack is pretty much the same. You can see the ELT's moved over to the left hand side now in a spare instrument hole from the right hand side panel. And as I was saying, the engine instrument layout on this lower panel is a little different. You can see the battery indicator is over to the left of the battery and alternator switches, and the arrangement of the other gauges, you see there's some blanks in there as well. Not quite so many instruments in the Microsoft Flight Sim version, so they're just blanked off. As you can see, the other large blanking off hole there underneath the CDI. This is only a lateral guidance CDI. There is no glide slope, there's no GNS, as you can see. Saying that, the KX165 is capable of that, but they haven't included that in the Microsoft Flight Sim version. So that's what we've got in this particular variant. Of course, the beauty of these panels and Air Manager is, of course, if you don't like the subset of instruments that are in it currently, if you don't fly with a virtual cockpit like I don't, you don't see any of that anyway. So you're free to have whatever poetic license you choose and put whatever instruments you want into the aeroplane. But these are as close to what's in the sim as possible variants. But that's not to say that I couldn't put a different CDI, or I couldn't put a another radio stack, different transponder, whatever I wanted, within reason, of course. So The right hand side panel is relatively sparse compared to the other one. Obviously not so many instruments in the radio stack, but you can see the carb heat is over on that side as opposed to the left now. There's a different instrument there that wasn't in the Xplane version, which is a bit like a Hobbs timer type instrument there, fitted in that large hole on a blanking plate to fit the smaller instrument. Again, that's how it is in the sim. And then the fuel selector, you see it's a little different. It's got a yellow handle this time, but it's the same sort of control. You flick it to on, and then it toggles over back to off again if you need to control it. So that is the Microsoft Flight Sim version. So I think what we'll do is give this one a quick start as well, and I think that'll be pretty much all there is to show with these panels. Let's go ahead and turn our fuel on. Mixture to rich. Battery on. Ignition to both. Clear prop. Alternator on, get rid of that charge light. Trim to the takeoff range. I think we turned the radios on before, didn't we? I should have had those lights on. Oops. Hang on. So there you go. Anyway, that is the Microsoft Flight Sim version. A few little things to iron out still, but I'm pretty much there with the DR400. I've been flying it around a little bit. Actually, it was one of the first aircraft I started to have a little fly around in Microsoft Flight Sim because I had a panel for, so I hadn't really looked or done any of the others before, but that was one of the ones that I'd already started on, knowing that it was in the sim with generic events and variables. So a little bit of tinkering to get it to right, because the new sim is a little different to FSX, but other than that it wasn't too bad. So hence why I started working on the 172 G1000 panel that I think I showed in a couple of videos or so ago. That panel was actually developed after this one. This one I've had done for a long time, I just haven't got around to showing it, and so hence why I did the video today, to show this one off. I've got some others as well still to show for some other aircraft, for different things and whatnot, so keep watching, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks again. Bye.